Welcome to the Relevance Report, where we explore the relevant stories that are shaping our world today. I'm Zenith Cramp, your host this week. On today's show, we will be discussing growing provincial concerns that are reflecting heavily on our citizens. Our teachers are fed up and on strike. Alberta's United Conservative government is facing backlash over their controversial new vaccine policy. Transgender women have just been banned from sports under the guise of fairness and safety. We'll be looking at growing concerns over mental health and the high costs and limited access to treatments. Finally, the company PV Mart is making a comeback in 4 Albertan small towns after becoming bankrupt. Right now, about 51,000 Alberta teachers are on strike, but this has been an explosion of decades-long issues in public education. Abish Messon dives into the strike and its impact on students and families.
Better wages, manageable class sizes, improved administration, and better funded resources for classrooms. In February 2002, there were over 20,000 teachers on strike for these very things, and students at the time made their way to the legislature to protest on behalf of their teachers and the abuse of the education system. Now, teachers are threatening to go on strike starting October 6th, standing up province-wide and fighting if no changes are made. These demands feel like they should be a given, and they are not self-oriented. This is for the increased opportunity of ensuring success for their students as well. Teacher burnout has become a very real concern, and this does not bode well for those that are being educated. Teachers have faced a stagnant wage in an increasingly difficult economy. This is made worse by the fact that many resources that they require in order to do their jobs are coming out of their own pockets. In late 2024, it was reported that about 227 schools in Alberta were over capacity, most of these being located in major urban centers such as Edmonton and Calgary. This issue in particular is something that is being felt by parents and guardians as well as students and teachers. The drastic increase in population, and therefore classroom sizes, has become more than daunting for educators. This in itself is a significant marker, because the bigger the class, the more difficult it proves to be to teach and manage. This is because appropriate classroom sizes are highly beneficial not just for students, who are provided with a better opportunity for engagement, but also for the teachers, who can better assess what their students may need from them, such as one-on-one time being more accessible for those who need it. Many parents have thrown their own hats into the ring for a number of reasons. Many believe that our educators of future generations deserve more than they receive, and agree that they are being heinously let down by administrators and government. Many parents have only shown concern now that their children's education is being threatened. Teachers have been voicing concerns for years now about the strain that their jobs take, and they seem to have finally gotten fed up with going unheard. This is really impactful because teachers and students alike are standing up and fighting for themselves and for each other.
Education is not the only space that the Alberta government has been facing backlash in. They are enforcing a controversial COVID vaccine policy. Now, if most Albertans want the vaccine, they will need to pay for it. James Pincock is here to walk you through the timeline, as well as what this could mean going forward.
On the 11th of June, Alberta's government announced they will no longer be providing free COVID-19 vaccinations to the vast majority of Albertans going into the fall respiratory disease season. While a very narrow group managed to maintain free access to this healthcare, Albertans who are not living in senior care or have underlying medical conditions will need to pay out of pocket. Previously, funding for vaccines came from the federal government, but as of this year, the financial burden of COVID vaccine programs are being shifted onto the provinces and territories. Backlash quickly ensued after the announcement, with healthcare organizations and political opponents coming out publicly against the new policy. After facing significant pushback from Albertans in the healthcare industry, the government revised its rollout plan to include healthcare workers as those eligible in the first phase of the new vaccination policy. Those phases are as follows. In Phase 1, Albertans in senior homes, home care, or on social programs will be able to get provincially funded vaccines, along with healthcare workers and Albertans over the age of 6 months with underlying health conditions. In the second phase, the COVID vaccine will be made available to all Albertans, however, they will need to pay out of pocket. Phase 1 will be starting on October 1st, with Phase 2 coming out on October 20th, and at the price of $100 per dose. This reignited the controversy, with opposition leader of the NDP, Naheed Nenshi, calling on the government to provide free vaccines for its citizens. Other questions arise as well, especially at the steep price tag that will come with getting a COVID vaccine this fall. The impact this change will have on lower-income Albertans has yet to be seen, but $100 is a steep asking price, especially for lower-income families. According to Canada's 2022 Affordability Index, over half of Albertans are living paycheck to paycheck, and it is hard to imagine that they will be able to justify spending $100 on a vaccine rather than groceries. There is also a question about access to COVID vaccines. With the new changes, COVID vaccines will now only be available at public health clinics, with pharmacies no longer being able to administer them. This could further reduce vaccination rates, as reducing the availability of vaccines may have negative impact on wait times, which is another pain point for Albertans. Many of those against the new policy have called the plan anti-science and are criticizing the government for catering to the wishes of a minority of anti-vaxxers rather than governing for the good of all Albertans. One of those voicing this sentiment is Gil McGowan, president of the Alberta Federation of Labour, who expressed in a CTV interview that making vaccines free and accessible may be cheaper in the long run, as it acts as a preventative measure to more damaging outcomes. In the same interview, he also said he felt embarrassed for being Albertan to be reduced down to anti-vaxxers by this government. Vaccine hesitancy has been a topic on the rise across the world, especially after the beginning of the pandemic. According to Public Health Canada, when surveyed, 43% of parents of children under the age of 18 reported they were vaccine hesitant in 2024, with the highest being Alberta at 49%. This is up from 17% in a similar study by Public Health Canada in 2017. This culminated in the 2022 Freedom Convoy, a huge protest against mandatory vaccination in the trucking industry that quickly exploded into a much bigger movement against the vaccine, as well as perceived government overreach. Danielle Smith, who is now leading this policy of limiting vaccine access, has been and continues to be a vocal supporter of these protests. Amongst all this news, Quebec has announced it is following in Alberta's footsteps and also shifting the cost of vaccinations onto individuals. While BC and Saskatchewan have made their commitments to having free COVID vaccinations clear, we could be seeing the start of a trend that leaves more Canadians across the country more vulnerable to disease.
Around the same time the Alberta government restricted vaccine access, they also restricted women's access to sports. At the start of September, the government put the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act in action, banning all transgender athletes from women's sports. Women now have to declare and prove their sex to keep playing. To challenge the government's reasoning behind this bill and dispel common misconceptions, here's my opinion piece. On September 1st, 2025, the Alberta government saved women's sports from what they say is its greatest threat: transgender athletes. In their words, the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act, or Bill 29, is leading the country to protect the integrity of female athletic competitions. In other words, they've banned all transgender athletes 12 and older in Alberta from competing in women's amateur sports. This bill was built off popular anti-trans rhetoric that has been running rampant across North America over the past few years. The Alberta government would like you to believe that transgender athletes pose some sort of safety risk to cisgender women, that they have some sort of biological superpower that makes them naturally superior in sports. Is this even true? Does this ideology actually threaten the future of women's sports in Alberta? Let's dive into it. When Bill 29 was first proposed, suddenly the future of Alberta's university sports was up in the air. Bill 29 went directly against U Sports inclusion policies, so universities like MacEwan had to face the very real possibility that their women's teams would be excluded from Canada's premier university sports league. Thankfully, we now know that the Alberta government will not be able to apply its policies to out-of-province athletes, which keeps the Griffins in the game for now. Alberta's U Sports status may be safe, but you shouldn't wipe your brow in relief and call it a day just yet. Despite its very convincing name, the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act is threatening women's safety by opening them up to judgment and harassment. If a woman doesn't conform to the traditional Western ideal of femininity, outside observers now have legal recourse to accuse her of being transgender and try to get her banned from sport. Bennett Jensen, legal director from the 2S LGBTQIA+ advocacy group EGAL, said that the government introducing a complaint-based snitch line will spur more public policing of women's bodies and gender presentation. Already, we've seen this so-called transvestigating impacting athletes from across the world, like Olympic boxer Iman Khalif, who was relentlessly attacked online and falsely accused of being transgender. Or even a 9-year-old girl in BC who was accosted during a track and field event by an older man who didn't believe she was truly a girl. Giving people another way to oppress women is not what we should view as fair and safe. Too often, coverage of Bill 29 dances around the core issue that transgender women in Alberta are no longer allowed to compete in the sports they love. I think that reporters are afraid to side with transgender women and risk the inevitable backlash when opponents claim that transgender women have some sort of biological advantage over cisgender women. We've all heard this. It's one of transphobes' favorite talking points. But what if I were to tell you that recent studies are proving this wrong? A report commissioned by the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport declares that there is currently no substantial evidence of any biological advantages that would impede the fairness of trans women competing in women's sport. A study funded by the International Olympic Committee even suggests that transgender women undergoing hormone therapy may be at a physical disadvantage compared to cisgender women. The Alberta government's policies show that they do not care about fairness and safety for women. The UCP is pitting their supporters against an easy target to gain support. If they can get away with Bill 29, or Bill 26 and 27, which also attack transgender people, or their new book ban, what will come next? Infringing on rights and freedoms is a slippery slope, so we need to start questioning and challenging our government's decisions now, before it's too late. Society is facing a surge in mental health cases. With the high costs of therapy and counseling, treatments are less accessible. Gigi Revo looks at mental health statistics and why she believes every individual could benefit from seeing a therapist or counselor.
Mental health. Before you think that doesn't apply to me, my life's great, let me stop you right there. Mental health universally affects everyone, and no one is immune to it. This is an important topic, especially considering the surge in mental health cases. The World Health Organization has reported over 1 billion people living with mental health disorders as of September 2nd, 2025. As we move into the winter months, many people start to feel the effects of seasonal depression, making this the perfect time to open up the conversation and get the ball rolling. The point I'm trying to get across is that we all need support. I truly believe that everyone, no matter their age, background, or situation, should have access to counseling or therapy from a young age. It is so crucial that mental health doesn't become something you deal with once you're quote-unquote broken, but something you maintain, just as you would your physical health. We should be teaching kids from a young age how to communicate their feelings effectively, how to manage emotions, and how to ask for help. Imagine how much healthier and more connected our society would be if teaching emotional literacy were as normal as learning math or science. Another huge factor in mental health is the environment you're in. Certain places, relationships, or situations can prevent you from healing and even worsen your mental health. It's crucial to put yourself in spaces, whether physical or emotional, that support your growth. For example, I've had to distance myself from relationships, whether romantic or friendly, that were holding me back from healing. Removing yourself from harmful environments isn't selfish, it's necessary. Putting yourself first is an essential part of the healing journey. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. explained in Mel Robbins' book, Let Them, choosing peace is not weakness, it's power. Lastly, I want to touch on when to reach out for help. Our brains are powerful, they can hold so much emotion and information, but everyone has a limit. You don't have to wait until you're overwhelmed to talk to someone. Therapy, counseling, or even simply opening up to a trusted friend is important, even when you're doing well. Learning to communicate openly and consistently can prevent a lot of pain later on. If we normalize therapy, normalize asking for help, and teach emotional communication early, we can build a generation that's more resilient, compassionate, and equipped to handle all of life's challenges. Thank you.
Lastly, we will be talking about a local business called PV Mart. Over the past year, it's been a roller coaster ride for the company. Orisha Neufeld shares what has happened to PV Mart, their future plans, and how these changes affect the vibrancy of small towns.
PV Mart, once a Canada-wide business that supported farmers, ranchers, and homesteaders, had closed down earlier this year due to financial struggles. The closures started in eastern Canada, but ended up becoming countrywide due to the inability for the company to recover from its financial struggles caused by large loans. This led to all PV Mart store closures countrywide by the end of spring 2025. All small towns are feeling the loss of PV Mart as it is such a staple place within these communities, carrying a variety of stock that large corporations such as Canadian Tire, Rona, Lowe's, Home Hardware, and UFA, including others, would provide, but in one convenient location. After a summer of PV Mart's absence, the company has been bought out and will only be returning to Alberta this fall. PV Mart released a statement on August 25, 2025, stating that the stores that will be reopening will be located in Spruce Grove, Westlock, Camrose, and Lacombe. These locations were the most profitable locations before the closures earlier this year. A new change that will accompany these store reopenings will be focused on selling more locally made products to highlight Canadian-made goods. This will be very beneficial for small towns and other small businesses. Small towns are very dependent on businesses like PV Mart, especially in rural communities. Being able to go to a place where you can buy parts for your tractor, food for your livestock, and canning supplies in the fall is an essential place within these small communities. The accompaniment of local products also being sold will help other small businesses profit, but also create a more diverse customer base by bringing in Canadian-made products for Canadians.
Thanks for joining us for the Relevance Report. This week's episode was produced by Zenith Kramp, Orisha Neufeld, Abish Messon, James Pincock, and Gigi Revo. The show was edited by James Pincock. The show's supervising producer is Sheena Rossiter. Additional studio supervision by Sasha Stanovic. This episode was produced as part of the BCSC 206 Introduction to Audio and Video course in the fall 2025 semester. The course is part of the Bachelor of Communication Studies program in the Department of Communication at MacEwan University. The show was edited and produced out of the MacEwan Media Production Studio. Our theme music is called Buzzing by Kaylee Lambert. Additional music for this podcast is Future Design by Penguin Music, Memories of Nature by Grand Project, Lost Hope by Patrick A., and Instrumental Music Acoustic Country by Tongue Art 7, all sourced from Pixabay. Logo design for this podcast is by Sasha Stanovic. And I'm Zenith Kramp, your host for this week's episode. This podcast was recorded on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 9, 10, and 11, within the historical North Saskatchewan River Territory. Don't forget to subscribe to the Relevance Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you heard, please leave us a review and rating. It really helps people find the show. Please join us again next week when we report the relevant stories that are shaping our world.